Welcome back to DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast to review one of those races we seem to get every single year where the entire grid forgets how to drive. We have a crash-filled race, we have incident after incident, we have caution after caution, and yet the one thing that remains through all those races is Scott Dixon, who yet again somehow found a way to win at the Detroit Grand Prix, the first win he's had on the new layout. And I mean, where to begin with this one? I think Dixon's brilliance yet again shines through. He took a bit of a risky fuel save strategy. He was helped out by a few cautions, but it was veteran Dixon at the front, pulled away ever so slightly, and once he got out the front, he was never realistically going to lose it. So, yet another victory for Dixon, who now propels himself into the lead of the championship.
Yeah, it was one of those classic races where it's a complete whirlwind. You look through the order, you have not really an idea, of how people have ended up where they've ended up. Strategy, well, it doesn't go out the window for the teams, but I think the strategist is about the only people who are actually following what is going on from a strategic standpoint. But yeah, it all felt a bit chaotic all weekend. I mean, it was less than 5 days, I think, after the Indy 500 had even started. By the time we were back on track on Friday for practice, there was such little time for the paddock to kind of gather themselves, to recover. And I think that kind of reflected in what was a caution-filled race with a lot of penalties, some questionable driving standards, some tired driving standards. I mean, we'll get onto it, but through the weekend there was a lot of aggro, and that kind of just led into what was a very chaotic race. And it was tiring just being at home covering the Indy 500. I can't imagine for the drivers who are having to make one of the toughest transitions from a super speedway to the tight, bumpy street course. It must be so difficult. There's so many emotions to settle, and when all of this chaos kind of ensues, as you said, Dan, of course, it's Dixon that reigns supreme. It was kind of one of those classic weekends, wasn't it, where he was rarely the quickest, but it's just that execution from him, from his team throughout the race. I mean, he said that, it takes a bit of luck to be in these positions, but I think when you're in these positions and they kind of roll the dice so often, it comes down to Dixon really being able to execute all of these fuel saves. And it doesn't really surprise you anymore, this sort of spectacular execution that he has in these situations. And he made a crucial move late on after Herta was at the end of the lead lap and Dixon had to get around him. But he didn't really get frustrated. Herta did his job and kind of got out of the way eventually. But yeah, just a solid weekend from Dixon. And then it comes to the race and he really pounces. I mean, even he got into the Fast Six. That was his 100th Fast Six in his career. But yeah, I mean, Scott Dixon, bravo.
He's the Iceman, isn't he? He really is the Iceman. I've got to give myself some credit, because I said halfway through, this just feels like a Dixon race. This is a Dixon inevitability that he'll find a way to win. And I've talked about his crazy races. The sort of once a year we get these ridiculously crazy races. Dixon won Laguna Seca last year. He won Nashville the year before. It's becoming a bit of a common trend for Scott Dixon. But if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him. His racecraft is second to none. Is by far away the best in the field. And I've said this sort of thing on the podcast before, where you never go into a weekend and Dixon is the quickest. When was the last time I went to a weekend and Dixon dominated practice? He dominated qualifying years ago, with all respect to Scott Dixon. But his racecraft is just so magic that he doesn't need to be the quickest on any given day, because if he's given a strategy to pull off or a high pressure situation, he's going to be the one who performs best in these moments. And that's why he's a 6-time champion and only 9 wins off the most of all time.
And he leads the championship again now. It's kind of, we've spoken a bit about how in recent years, I guess since 2020, he's not really started seasons in any sort of electric fashion. But here we are, he already has 2 wins of kind of a quite similar nature, obviously in one race, this race all the more chaotic. But yeah, he's in a great position.
Yeah, obviously it's a bit of a poor day for Alex Palou, whose top 8 streak ends today. We'll obviously touch on him a bit more later, but that's why Dixon has propelled himself into the lead of the standings. And it was a good day for several people. Let's get on to the rest of the podium. I think Marcus Ericssson is one who we can start off with. He said he needed a complete reset after the Indianapolis 500 crashing out in the first corner. This was 2024 2.0 for him. And a bit like Dixon, it's quite hard to pick people's individual races just because it was all over the place. But again, Ericssson was one who obviously got a fairly favourable situational strategy in the end, and he was making moves. He overtook his teammate Carl Kirkwood, who looked like the one to beat for quite a while. Then he got Marcus Armstrong, who did a fantastic effort at helping his teammate Scott Dixon to win, because after Ericssson overtook Armstrong, he was electric, but obviously didn't quite have the pace for Dixon. But a huge result for Ericssson. It is his first podium in Andretti colours. I think it's his first podium since maybe the Indy 500 last year. So a great result for Ericssson, and his 2024 2.0 has begun in great fashion.
I mean, yeah, after all of the toil of May, I mean, he said that the 500, it wasn't weird, it was terrible. And I think he said he felt like he'd aged about 5 years. And it kind of went before that as well. He'd had quite a few rocky races after, a decent enough start to the season. He kind of just, nothing seemed to be going right for him. But yeah, he really seemed to turn that around this weekend, and not without adversity. I mean, opening practice, he got pretty large. I think it was his right rear. He clobbered the wall on the outside, I think, of turn 7. Then he had an electrical issue early in second practice. So there was lots to overcome even this weekend. It looked like it was just going to be another kind of disaster. But no, got through to the fast 12. He was kind of back on par with his teammates. And then, yeah, he kind of, I guess from the mid-race onwards, was always kind of in position to pounce, and ultimately overtook Kirkwood in those latter stages to get onto the podium, had the pace to pass Armstrong as well, and a few more laps might have been on Dixon, but as always, Dixon kind of managed to perfection, and he said even with 2 laps to go, Dixon, he was a bit worried about fuel, but of course, you needn't worry a Scott Dixon in a fuel save.
I think one of the things that kind of helped him as well was his strategy when it started raining. When everyone came into the pits, he was in one of like the top 7 that didn't pit. He kind of stayed out onto slicks. I don't know if he went in later, but I do know like at one point he did stay out, and I feel like that may be one of the things that helped him, because kind of as the caution went on, kind of the track started to dry a bit. So then everyone that did pit for like wet had to go back in. So I feel like that just saved him a bit of time and kind of helped him throughout the race, just like keeping him ahead a little bit. But
yeah, I guess the rain swing we didn't mention at the top, and that fell, I guess, when we kind of worked through the incidents. We'll delve into a bit more of that, but it was ultimately, you had a few cars, you had Palou, you had Herta coming in and putting those wet tyres on, and then as the caution went on and lasted longer, that proved a bad decision. So you had the likes of Dixon, the likes of Ericssson. At the end of the day, it was kind of a race-winning call to stay out at that point.
We'll move on to the final step of the podium, and for the first time in his career, it was Marcus Armstrong who stood in that podium. I said, I think probably just before the Indy 500, that Marcus Armstrong needs a headline result, and he has finally got that headline result. A podium well driven. I guess one knows where he sort of randomly cycled to the front. He got an incident with Christian Lundgaard, sort of midway on. I think it's lap 53. The caution was called for an incident he had with Lundgaard, and I don't quite know how he went back to the front, but he did. And anyway, he held off Ericssson for quite a while. Obviously, got overtaken in the end. He actually ran out of fuel on the finish line. To talk about timing to perfection, Armstrong did that. Armstrong's team did that perfectly. So first career podium for Marcus Armstrong. So pretty good day for him.
I don't really know how he kind of cycled up, but I know at the beginning he was kind of slotting in. I feel like in the top 12-ish, I feel like he had a moment where he was kind of like he had to give up a few places or kind of got overtaken. But I feel like through that he was kind of doing all right to kind of cycle through, and just at the end, I think he did a really good job. I feel like I don't really know what kind of helped him to get up into like the top 3 and to kind of be on the podium, but then he did. And you mentioned earlier his defending against Ericssson, and he did a really good job at defending for as long as he did. I wish it was a couple laps longer, but I mean, he's still on the podium. It's still his highest finish yet.
Armstrong got a penalty on lap 27, yield 3 positions for blocking.
And it was kind of one of those as well, where being caught up in that kind of mid-race incident, I guess it almost forces the team's hand in a way to run a different strategy. We've seen it early on with, I guess, the likes of Rossi, as we'll come on to, finishing 5th. Getting caught up in these early incidents, or incidents at any point, obviously, with Armstrong's kind of by the halfway point, it can help teams go onto a riskier strategy and pay off. It actually reminded me quite a lot of Blomqvist's podium at Barber, and I think it was quite important and quite a boost for Armstrong that, he's probably had a better season than his rookie teammate Blomqvist. However, I think it was just important after Blomqvist in what was it, his 3rd competitive race getting on the podium, that Armstrong kind of got that back and kind of matched him. And he was another one that, obviously it was a tricky 500 in the end after all the preparation. ending early through no fault of his own with the whole engine blowout that he had. But weirdly, it started off as one of Armstrong's weaker weekends. It was the first time he hadn't made the Fast 12 on road and street courses all season, actually. I think he qualified inside the top 10 every race prior to that. So, yeah, I think to recover through the race, he kept his kept his nose clean. Not many people kept their noses clean, but he kept his nose cleaner than most. And I guess you could say he probably learned a thing or two from Dixon because, yeah, he was given the fuel number, but he still had to execute that. And fair play to him, he really did, and evidently did so to perfection.
I think we'll also touch on Carl Kirkwood, who was just the individual who looked like for a period he was the one who had the question mark over Dixon. Would he be the one who could snatch it? Because Kirkwood was sort of the only individual who was consistently at the front all day long. He didn't pit when it rained, which obviously led him there. He started 6th, so he's obviously in a good position from the start, and he sort of remained there all day, really. He was very clean compared to some of his counterparts, as we said, just stayed out when it was wet, and then he pitted, and it sort of seemed he would catch up. He was on the back of Armstrong for several laps, and then I don't know if he used his tyre too quickly or what he did, because he fell off Armstrong very quickly. Ericssson got him, and then after that it was pretty anonymous. I mean, as you note, is the first time in Kirkwood's career that he's got a top 5, which isn't a win, which I'm sure he'll be pretty pleased with. But he lies now 6th in the standings just because he hasn't had a worse finish than 11th all year. So it's been a pretty good year so far for Kirkwood in some ways. And yeah, I think he'll be. You said it on the broadcast. I think he's pretty happy with the result, but maybe there could have been more when you look at certain points in the race. But I think Kirkwood might have been maybe one of the drivers of the day, if not the driver of the day.
Yeah, he came into the post-practice press conference, on Friday, and he was very kind of keen to point out that he felt he was a lot better than kind of where he did stand in the championship, that he should really be knocking on the top 5 because he's been one of the most consistent drivers, even if not, with these headline results. I think he had a couple of 7ths, maybe a 10th, 11th. But yeah, this was best race of the season. Obviously, ending that bizarre top 5 run of his only two top 5s being wins, which is a very interesting quirk. It would have been cool if he made it three top 5s all being wins. But yeah, it wasn't quite to be. But he had a really, really good race, I thought. And I think very quietly he started this season really quite well, actually.
He's ahead of Herta in the standings now, believe it or not.
Yeah. And I mean, credit to Marcus Armstrong for kind of the defence he put up against Kirkwood, and ultimately maybe that's kind of what killed Kirkwood's race off. And he did, start struggling, got passed by Ericssson, of course. But yeah, I would imagine he'll still be pretty happy with how his weekend went.
Right, so there's a lot of incidents to unpick because there were 8 cautions. So we're going to try our best to unpick some of them and everything in between. So we'll start off at the very start on lap 1, which was Théo Pourchaire basically getting a bit hot into Will Power. That caused him to spin. That caused a massive check-up. That including the likes of Santino Ferrucci, Pato O'Ward, Alexander Rossi was in there. It's hard to think who else was in there. Linus Lundqvist was one in there. Jack Harvey was in there. Tristan Vautier was in there. So it caused a bit of a pile-up at the start, where basically just Pourchaire got a bit too hot, spun Power, and yeah, it just caused a bit of carnage. I don't think Pourchaire got a penalty for that, which is quite odd.
No, I actually don't think Pourchaire was the guilty part. I think it was more Lundgaard, if anyone.
Well, he gave a slight nudge to Pourchaire, didn't he?
Lundgaard kind of shoved it down the inside of Pourchaire, and ultimately Pourchaire couldn't have gone really anywhere else. But I ultimately think it's kind of one of those where you probably wouldn't penalise anyone for it, just kind of because of the nature of the incident. It's at the start. It's so tight. It gets tight, as Newgarden famously once said. Yeah, it took. Well, I was going to say took out some big names, but I think today was one showing of the robust nature of these Dallara DW12s, because yeah, we weren't seeing cars retire. It was just a lot of contact, and they kept on limping on. Yeah, it was a messy start that neither me nor Dan actually saw live, because Indy next race winner Louis Foster was about an hour late to his press conference and arrived pretty much just as the green flag was flown, which was slightly irritating, but kind of had a bit of a watch along of the start with the Andretti Indy next driver. But yeah, I think it was kind of the chaotic start that set the precedent for a very chaotic race that most of the drivers kind of predicted would be the case, given it's just so tight. I mean, I forgot just how narrow this track was, to be quite honest. It's a really, really narrow track.
I feel like as well, most of the cautions were probably around, well, maybe not most, but quite a few of them were around turn 1 just because of how kind of tight that corner is. And it's just also, if one person spins and people go around the outside, then they're just stuck there until they like can leave. And it's just one of them where, yeah, I feel like a lot of the cautions were just in that turn 1.
Caution number 2 was on lap 16, which was Santino Ferrucci piling to the back of Elio Castroneves, who was in for this weekend. We'll probably get onto a bit later. And then Kevin Simpson basically turned in and had not many places to go. Ferrucci got a penalty for avoidable contact, which was a stop and go. I think we'll probably get onto Ferrucci's day a bit more general later. But just talking about the incident itself, just a pretty unfortunate one, just a bit clumsy, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of summed up Ferrucci's weekend. I'm not sure anyone was particularly happy with Santino Ferrucci this weekend, but yes, we will delve in depth into that later. Unfortunately for Kiffin Simpson, who has done a very good job at kind of keeping clean this season, it was kind of the first time he's been caught up in this sort of chaos, and I guess we saw it with quite a few of the incidents. Drivers just on the track this tight have nowhere to go. If someone spins in front of them, yeah, nothing much to do. But again, these cars both continued, albeit laps down and kind of just out of contention.
Then it was so we had a little break before the next caution, lap 33, and that was Scott McLaughlin having a bit of an incident on his own at turn 1. He was running completely by himself, running in P2, was having a decent day to that point where he just sort of lost grip on the rears and went careering into the turn 1 wall, unfortunately, for McLaughlin.
Well, yeah, that was a rare error, because I don't remember the last time I've kind of seen Scott McLaughlin make that sort of mistake. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, well, there must have been contact, but he was running, I think, second at the time, and I mean, goodness knows what would have happened for the rest of the race. But again, that kind of put him down out of contention. He went a lap down, and yeah, it was straight away just an apology on the radio. He was quite frenetically trying to get the AMR safety crew over to reboot him, but unfortunately, yeah, couldn't be done in time.
Yeah, they had to use the recovery vehicle as well because the jack wasn't doing enough. But I don't know how long he was stuck for, but I feel like it was around 3 laps or so. I feel like I don't
he
know.
only ended 1 lap down.
During McLaughlin's caution, we had that downpour, wasn't it? Because it started raining, and then it was due go on to wets, due not gone to wets, and then for some reason, IndyCar let the caution go on for ridiculously long, which meant the benefit of running the wets was completely negligible because you had to pit immediately, but otherwise you'd lose loads of time. So that was a bit of a shame. I don't know what IndyCar were particularly doing. I know they said they were trying to sort out the order, but it was just a bit odd.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of cautions that lasted maybe a little bit too long, you felt. Yeah, trying to sort out the order kind of took away what would have been quite an exciting period, you would say, because you had front runners. In fact, the 2 drivers that started on the front row, Colton Herta, Alex Palou, come in, and then by the time the caution ended, they weren't getting the benefit. I think we'll get onto it, but another caution comes out straight away, and then kind of, especially from the side of Palou, from his 10 team are usually so bulletproof with these sort of decisions. It was a bit of a, it was kind of a rare error, but I think, to be fair, ultimately they didn't lose that much ground because of the decision.
Well, everyone sort of did it, so
yeah.
It was just a bit frustrating because you thought a wet restart would give you quite good action because you'd have half on wets, half on dries. Would it be the right call? Would it not be? And just because the start was a bit too long, we never quite got to find the answer out to it, which was.
And we also never got an answer because another caution came out straight away.
So as we sort of mentioned, this started a whole plethora of caution. We had caution after caution. I think we had another 3 in a row after this, which tells you pretty much all you need to know. The next caution was for contact between car number 12, Will Power, and car number 21, Adrena's VK. A bit of a weird one. I think Power was still on wets, wasn't he? At this point, I believe.
I can't remember who was on wets. He was on
pretty
dries.
sure
I think he was.
Power was on wets, and then VK went to the outside. Power sort of lost control mid-corner, hit VK whilst he was trying to recover his half spin, which sent VK into the barrier and stalled, unfortunately. So there's a lot of debate on the broadcast whose fault it was. Probably just a racing incident on this occasion, just a bit unfortunate. But Power, I believe, did get penalised for this. He got not just before this, he got failure to pack up with the yellow. And then for this one, he got avoidable contact restart at the back of the field.
Yeah, I mean, this was the first of many times that Power, after having his rear wing dislodged at the start by the first contact, and he went rearwards into the tyre barrier. You think he was back up into the top 10 at this point, and yeah, he quite, I guess, egregiously got penalised for it. It was one of a few kind of frustrating calls, I think, from driver standpoints. I think they kind of disagreed on the broadcast with this as well, because it kind of seemed, I think Power, was he making an inside move maybe, and VK was kind of just taking the racing line, and it didn't really feel like, it wasn't VK's fault by any means, but also while Power kind of instigated the contact, it didn't really feel like it was particularly his fault. Maybe he came in a little bit hot, but being sent to the back felt a little bit unfair, and he was quite furious at race control, actually. I think he's made a comment about Max Papis and only penalising his favourites and stuff. But yeah, it was one of many bits of adversity that Will Power faced.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get onto his individual day later, but he ended up with 4 penalties. We'll move on to the next caution, which, again, was immediately afterwards. Sorry, no, that's a lie. We got 1 lap of green, and then we had the other caution. On this occasion, it was Colton Herta trying to make a move on Alex Palou, way too optimistic. That was into turn 5. And poor Tristan Vautier, who we haven't mentioned him yet, was in the coin car for this weekend. We'll probably touch this day a bit later. Was just, unfortunately, just a bit of a passenger on the outside. Nowhere for him to go. But it's another case of Herta just getting too desperate in a pressure situation and throwing away what probably was going to be a podium.
Yeah, I think this was midway through the lap that we went back green, if I remember correctly. It was kind of during the street where it was just, it kind of started to get a little bit farcical, I think, where we just couldn't get any green laps. I think between just looking at the chart.
So lap 33 to 59 was basically all yellow.
Yeah, that was just stupid. And we had about, I think, even then up until lap 73, I think we had about 4 green laps. Yeah, this was a bad one from Herta, who, I think he was in a bit of a frustrating position. As we've kind of touched on, he was one of the drivers that ultimately wrongly came in and put the wet tyres on. Well, I think I don't know what Ericssson did. I assume Ericssson stayed out. Kirk would have definitely stayed out. They kind of come to that decision with Brian Herta. You'd had the likes of Lundgaard overruling the decision from the team, which again ultimately proved the right decision. But there was a bit of frustration you sensed from Herta in there. He had controlled the early kind of stages of the race after getting pole, his 12th pole in 87 races in IndyCar, so that works out about 14%. And he kind of commanded the start. He commanded from first caution restart as well, and then it kind of just snowballed a bit with the decision to go onto the wets, back onto the slicks. And I don't think he lost that many positions, but I don't really understand the move, to be honest. I think it just was I don't even think he was trying to put a move on anyone. It was just complete.
No, I think he's trying to get past Palou, no?
Yeah, I don't know. No, because I think Palou was Palou not one further up than Vautier? No, I don't remember exactly.
No, Vautier was in front, I think.
Was it? Okay.
He was definitely behind Herta. Sorry, Palou.
Yeah, I don't know whether he was trying to put in a move or not, but whatever he did, he just completely outbroke himself and heads up driving from Vautier to avoid it, I guess from Palou as well to avoid it. But I guess this was the kind of incident that I think kind of magnified the difference between Herta and the likes of Palou. You'd never see Palou putting in that sort of desperate move, making that sort of misjudgment. And it's something that Herta needs to kind of, I guess, I don't know, for want of a better way of putting it, fix up on a little bit. I think after the 500, that was a big opportunity missed, and this was another kind of pretty big opportunity missed, I feel.
Yeah, so just looking back at it, Herta was on the inside of Palou, and then Vautier tried to turn in, and there was a flying Gamebridge car on his inside, which put him into a bit of peril. We then tried to go green again on lap 53 until we had yet another incident, this time involving Linus Blomqvist, Marcus Armstrong, Christian Lundgaard, and Romain Grosjean. Just another too optimistic move by Lundgaard, hit Grosjean, sort of climbed over him a bit oddly, and that basically caused Armstrong and Blomqvist to check up behind them. It's just another one of those frustrating ones. It's just like, just calm down, relax, just please, just let's stop having these accidents. And yeah, Lundgaard must have been penalised for it. He was avoidable contact, stop and go.
Yeah, I think this one was more, I think, clear cut than the power into VK one. It was actually very similar that Lundgaard was kind of on the inside, Grosjean was taking the racing line, and it ruined what was actually quite a good run for Grosjean. He was up in the top 5. I think he tweeted afterwards that he felt that he was possibly in contention for even a podium. And this was a bit weird because Lundgaard kind of clobbered Grosjean and then mounted the 77 car somehow. I don't really know how that happened. He kind of kept driving and just drove up Grosjean's front left and somehow managed to reverse off.
Yeah,
but I kind of feel for Linus Blomqvist because he got caught up in both of the incidents that were of this kind of pile-up nature in, well, I always want to call it turn 1, but it's turn 3, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird.
Detroit's on those confusing tracks. I think there's about 3 different
Mid-Ohio's one.
Yeah, there's about 3 different turn 1s. Yeah, no, there was some, obviously Armstrong being cut off in this. This was the incident that ultimately I assume he came into the pits, and that's where kind of he launched this audacious strategy. That's an assumption. I don't know if he actually did.
Then we had 3 laps of green, and then we had yet another caution between Scott McLaughlin and Stingray Robb. Probably, I think it was deemed as a racing incident. Oh no, it wasn't. McLaughlin had avoidable contact restart at the back of the field. I don't think it was an outrageous move. It wasn't as ridiculous as Lundgaard's. I think maybe it was a bit on the optimistic side from Scott McLaughlin, but unfortunately just too wide into turn 5 doesn't quite work, and Stingray Robb was the unfortunate individual who ended up in the wall. I think
this was a bit like Powers, a little bit of a harsh penalty. I would have understood maybe if it were, well, actually, to be fair, McLaughlin was already a lap down, so it didn't really matter. But he must have been a lap down.
No, I don't think he was.
Or was he not a lap down? I don't know whether he
was a lap down. He was a lap down.
So again, that kind of, I guess, makes the move a little bit more, I guess, egregious, to use that word again. I don't think it was. I almost would argue it probably wasn't penalty worthy. He was enough along the inside, and then I feel like Robb maybe turned into him ever so slightly, but I don't know, I'm not pinning the blame on Robb by any chance.
And then one more straight away was Joseph Newgarden and Alex Palou. Newgarden sort of tried to go on the inside of Kirkwood. Did they collide ever so slightly? I think Newgarden was having his own spin before he hit Kirkwood. He
kind of spun into Kirkwood, and he spun into Kirkwood. That's the way I would put it.
Yeah, and then poor Alex Palou had absolutely nowhere to go and was just stuck. So that was the final caution. I'm glad we didn't get any after that, because the racing after that I thought was actually quite good. Yeah, but that ended. That was the 8th and final yellow of the day.
Yeah, and so that brought to an end. I mean, tip of the hat to Alex Palou. 23 consecutive races finishing not only inside the top 10 but the top 8 is just. I think I'm right in saying that it was the top 8. Yeah, unbelievable consistency, and this was the first time in quite a long time that I feel like Alex Palou has been struck with some sort of misfortune. It was, obviously there was kind of nothing he could do because, again, the tightness of this track, someone spins in front of you, you've got nowhere to go. He finished, I think, 16th in the end. We'll run through the order shortly. Yeah, it was. I am glad because the track. It's a difficult one. We've had drivers. Pato O'Ward, as we record, has tweeted saying he misses Belle Isle. Ryan Hunter-Reay was obviously watching and also made a comment about Belle Isle, the old Belle Isle.
Ryan Rahal retweeted Pato O'Ward's tweet.
That kind of shows the thoughts. I think Marcus Ericssson post-race in the press conference was... He kind of chuckled a bit and laughed a bit when he was asked about the track, and he almost seemed like he didn't really have the words to describe it. I think he wants a few more corners because it doesn't have many corners. It's quite a long straight. There are a few places where the bumps were kind of smoothened out somewhat. I think turn 3 on the run to turn 3 maybe, and one in turn 9 possibly as well. So a few changes, but I think generally it's a bit of a mixed bag from the drivers. I think McLaughlin said on Friday, it kind of adds to the character of it. A few of the drivers kind of complained a bit more about the bumpy nature.
What he forgot to say on lap 60, which was after the Lundgaard Grosjean one, he almost had another caution because Théo Pourchaire quite aggressively went down the inside of Romain Grosjean. Sorry, it was Augustin Canapino, wasn't it? So we almost had another one there. We almost had 6 cautions in a row. So Crazy day. Anyway, let's get on to the running orders. We said it's Dixon, Ericssson, Armstrong, Kirkwood. P5 was Alexander Rossi. He obviously got caught up in that lap one incident, as we mentioned. But he ended up fifth in the end, which is a pretty good result. And I think it cycles him to fifth in the standings, which is, I'd say, pretty good for Alex, considering he's had quite a quiet year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he kind of feels like he's hitting a little bit of form now, finding a little bit of rhythm, because we had a few weekends. I think, qualifying's been a struggle all year. He again didn't make it into the fast 12, and I think Barber was the one, wasn't it, where he had just have off-track excursion after off-track excursion, and I don't think he's been too pleased with the street course package. I don't think Arrow McLaren as a team have been really. After getting kind of jammed up behind the ward in that pile-up at the start, he found his way back, and as I kind of touched on earlier, it was kind of one of those that being caught in an incident at the start can kind of force a risky but good strategy. I think Dixon in the second Indy road course race last year, when he spun and still won, that was kind of the one that's kind of the model of that.
Yeah, it's quite hard to go through people's races because so much happened. It's quite hard to highlight individuals. He was ahead of Will Power, who probably, I think, has the award for the craziest day of absolutely anyone. He got 4 penalties. So we'll start off on lap 3. Emergency service and closed pit, restart at the back of the field. Lap 39, yield 3 positions for failure to pack up under yellow. Lap 60, as we said, lap 44, we had the restart for the contact with VK, and we ended it off on lap 60 for full service in a closed pit, which was a drive-through. Will Power's radio was, this is after the VK one, love you, Max, referring to Max Papis, always help your buddies and everyone else gets. And then he later said...
I'm fill in the blank.
He later said, Max Papis, the greatest. As long as you're his buddy, that's the big one. If you're his buddy, you're good.
All was well, though, when he was consoled by Flavor Flav in the aftermath of that. We didn't see Flav on the broadcast, or he wasn't interviewed, at least, as far as I'm aware. His race was just mental. I mean, the start was obviously, that was unfortunate, got tagged, and it must have been swift work, to be fair, to get his rear wing fixed, because it was a bit wonky.
Yes.
Then he'd made his way back, got pinned back again, obviously, with the VK contact. And that was a little bit unfortunate. Obviously got penalised for that. And then it was ultimately the thing that he was penalised for last, for a full service in the closed pits, that was a bit of a masterstroke, because, yes, the team will obviously have known they were going to get penalised for it. But ultimately, it was that stop that put him in the position to drive back up or cycle his way back up into 6th. So it was just at times it looked like a bit of an errant day that was kind of uncharacteristic of his season so far, but ultimately it was more big points picked up, and at the moment, along with Dixon and Palou, he looks like kind of the third in command in that championship fight.
Then we had Pato O'Ward, who again got caught up in lap 1. We didn't really see too much of him afterwards, I don't think. He dropped a few positions at the end, but I mean, I think it's one of those. He'll probably be quite happy with the result, considering he's not out of the championship fight. Yes, he's a bit off the likes of Power and Palou, but it's getting a P7 day like this where Palou drops points, and I think he'll probably take that. Not too bad. I don't think there's too much to touch on Pato's day, really. Apart from
in a regular race, you'd kind of say, oh, he made it from 12th to 7th. He's recovered from, he got into the fast 12, but I think he had a bit of a weird misjudgment late in qualifying. I think it brought out the red flag. He couldn't advance. And you would ordinarily say, oh, it's a decent recovery from 12th to get back up to 7th. Yeah, decent. But it was more of a good recovery because, again, he was one of those caught out at the very start.
25th at the start. So
it was a good drive. And
he'll probably take that. And looking at this stage in the season, probably could put him in championship contender, particularly with all the ovals coming up. So I think it's these results, especially after sort of a rough Long Beach in Alabama, to keep his nose clean a day like today, I think I'll be quite happy with. Then we got on to Felix Rosenqvist. Had quite a quiet day, although his final stint was something like 58 laps on the same tyre. So pretty incredible. 56 laps, close. Anyway, pretty incredible showing for Fro there. Yet another top 10 performance this season. I mean, that's sort of the norm now for Felix Rosenqvist, which is quite staggering to say, but again, he had quite a quiet day, just mega effort on that final stint to make those tyres last.
But one thing we missed when talking to Louis Foster was he got a puncture.
Did he?
Yes.
I missed it all. There we are. He had a puncture.
So it's another one of those. I feel like a few times he's kind of had just had the start of the race has just gone really wrong for him. This time, I think back to the Indy road course where I think he got caught up in that just complete melee at the start.
Santino Ferrucci, where do we start? Where do we start?
So much to say.
Hang on, let's start with us interviewing him midweek about the Indy 500 and Kyle Larson's attempts at the double.
And yeah, at the start of that press conference, well, just a bit of context, Ferrucci was driving back from Indy to, I believe it was Dallas, having a bit of a road trip. And he was speaking about how he loves driving and sometimes gets made fun of for loving driving so much as a way to unwind. So that was his way of kind of calming down after the whole manic nature of the month of May. And calm down, Santino Ferrucci did not.
We start on Friday, where he quite upset Kyle Kirkwood and Colton Herta, where Ferrucci was on a fast lap in practice. Kirkwood probably slightly misjudged it, turned in slightly on Ferrucci, which ruined his lap. And then he had a bizarre incident with Herta where he wouldn't let Herta pass on one of his laps. And then Ferrucci tries to have an argument with Kirkwood in the pit lane, shoves him out the way, and then you have a verbal exchange about the next 2 days. How are you, Santino? Hopefully you've had a good few weeks after the 500. First of all, we saw the strength of Penske obviously winning and sweeping the front row. How much do you feel they benefited from the alliance with you over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so obviously the race cars are the race cars, but the Q cars I think really kind of showed that alliance in full form. We were missing something. We couldn't quite figure out what was going on with our car. We could get it above the 233.2 mark all day. We're not quite sure what that was, but same thing in the race. We were just missing a little bit of speed, but those guys did an excellent job. I mean, they built quality cars, man, and they showed up and they did very well. I mean, and vice versa for us. I mean, we built some really good race cars. We were on their dampers, so we were running our own setup, but their equipment. So honestly, it worked both ways for us pretty well.
And on the sort of flip side of the occasion, particularly looking at Road and Street, do you feel you've benefited from that alliance significantly so far compared to last year?
Oh, definitely. I mean, just take a look at St. Pete doesn't really count because we didn't make it more than 3 corners last year. But look at a race like Barber, right? We last year I think we finished 18th, 19th. We're kind of nowhere. This year we were leading, running up front, and just kind of slightly different strategy, but we still ended up 7th. We were top 10 in the points going into Indy. We've had a much better year so far, and a lot of that is thanks to the Penske Alliance. We still have our own things that we're sorting out. All of our engineering department is brand new, with the exception of Michael Cannon and one of our DAGs. But other than that, yeah, it's been quite a learning process for us. I feel like we're with the continuity of just the driver, unfortunately. So it's a lot to learn and not a lot of time.
And then just looking back at the 500, I just wanted to see sort of your take on the first 100 laps or so. Did you find the driving a bit aggressive? We saw a lot of cautions compared to previous years that sort of ruin your flow a little bit, maybe hamper you a tiny bit?
I kind of figured. I actually told my boss, Larry, that I felt like this would be a very caution-filled race. I don't think it's due to the aggressivity of anybody in particular. Look, I was my fair share of aggressive. I mean, I was 3 wide, lap 1, going between Larson and Rossi. Like, I knew I was going to get by him. That's how I did it. I think what happened really, and why you saw so many wrecks, is Firestone is really trying to build the tire around the hybrid. So they stiffened up the left sides for the weight, which is the correct thing to do. Just the issue with that, and then us not implementing the hybrid till mid-Ohio. I mean, you can't tell them, hey, look, go remake God knows how many tires they make for us. 33 cars, and we have like 25 sets. So quick math there is a lot. They're not going to go remake all the tires. So the cars were definitely a little bit more free this year. And then everybody's really pushing limits because it's super competitive. So everybody's trying to ride that razor edge. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of wrecks, and luckily everyone walked away, and thank Doar for making a safe race car.
Thanks again, Dave. Just a quick follow-up for you, Santino. You spoke about last week's of your admiration for Kyle Larson doing a double. Obviously, that didn't quite work out due to the weather. First of all, how big do you think it is that we're getting such a big name compete in the biggest race in the series? And second of all, you've obviously done a bit of NASCAR yourself. Would you ever want to do it if you've got the opportunity?
Yeah. So Larson, I've watched Larson for a long time, and I like to call him a good friend. The dude's awesome. He's a wheelman, drives everything, literally. There's not a lot of beat drivers that will do and drive everything like him. I like to think that I'm one of the few, because I run the Chili Bowl every year. I have run some NASCAR. I do very much enjoy it. Hopefully he comes back. I feel bad because the media commitments that I feel like he does is absolutely ridiculous and insane. But he brings an incredible energy to Indy. Say the same thing like Jimmy Johnson coming to run the Indy 500, man. It's such a cool thing. I would have loved to see Jimmy run in his prime, though. I think that would have been because he did really well in the oval races once he started to really figure it out. But I'd love to see Jimmy in his prime, like when he's winning championship years, come run the IndyCar. So I think it'd be really cool. And yeah, I definitely want to run the double. I think that there potentially could be possibility for it for me in the future. I think it'd be fun to go the other way because most drivers do it the NASCAR to Indy and then back to NASCAR. You don't have any IndyCar drivers full time going to NASCAR and back. And me and Kyle actually talked about it a little bit, and we think it's just you can hop in a quality car here at Indy, and you can't, you don't really have that opportunity in NASCAR because the field is always full. All the top cars are very tough to get into. You need to run it with a team that's going to run a really solid extra car effort, like a Legacy Motors or 23XI or Trackhouse, or RCR. Like that would be the only way I think one of the IndyCar drivers or myself, if I ever get the opportunity, would do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Santino. Thank you, Dave. Should we touch on more calm waters? Teo Pourchaire. I mean, this race wasn't very calm. He caused an accident and a half. But, he had a quite good weekend. He topped his group qualifying session, qualified 7th in the end. Then had the incident at the start, and then he crashed on someone late, and then he drove half the race with bent steering, which was pretty impressive. And he's still making moves with bent steering. And I mean, his weekend was just as crazy, but ended up 10th in the end, which I thought was a pretty cracking result. Obviously, he's best in his short career to date, and we're seeing in the rest of the season if he drives like that, it's very, very much welcome without the crashes, obviously.
I mean, yeah, obviously he had that issue in the race with Canapino, and to come and to kind of deal with the bent steering and still bring it home as he did. That's a really, really good effort, I thought, from Pourchaire. I believe his first top 10 in IndyCar. He was the best non-Penske Chevy in qualifying. Actually, that's something interesting to note. Yeah, really, really solid. He obviously qualified the best of the Arrow McLaren cars. And race long, I feel like he managed the race pretty well.
We'll then go to Christian Lundgaard, who was at the front all day. As we know, he stayed out when the rain started to pour. Then he recovered to, I think, 6th, and then he disappeared in the last lap. He dropped about 5 places. Does anyone know why? Or
I am doing my digging. I feel like we had a similar thing with Christian Lundgaard the other week where I was left digging. Or was it Santino? I can't remember who it was.
Is it Rossi?
I remember
last week.
I remember after the Indy road course race, I had to scramble to look for a team's press release, post-weekend press release, to try and find out what actually happened. Yeah, I think he might even have been 5th, to be honest. And I have absolutely no idea what happened to him. He had a bit of he was kind of, would you say, second to power in terms of just wildness of day?
Yeah, quite possibly.
Because he looked like a decent bet for the win at one point. I think did he lead it? So I feel like he must have led.
He led 6 laps.
He led 6 laps. So
whilst it was wet, I think. So
yeah. Oh yeah, because that was as we kind of touched on. He made that call to stay out. He overruled what the team said, and that kind of I was going to say worked out in the end, but there's so much happened after that you just can't be sure, can you? Because obviously you had the contact with Grosjean, and somehow from being on top of the 77 Hunkos car, he managed to find his way back into the top 5, and then Did he have go for a splash of fuel? Did he run out of fuel?
Yeah, you wouldn't go for a splash though and only lose 5 places.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it is.
Maybe made a mistake.
It's quite a short pit lane, but
no,
yeah,
because he's only about 11 seconds relative to about 5th or 6th, so maybe made a mistake or something.
Maybe,
Guess we'll never know. Then the next few people are quite quiet days, respectively. Canapino, Fittipaldi, VK, and Rahal. I know VK got spun. Then we had Alex Palou, who we sort of touched on earlier. A bit of a disastrous day, but across the course of the season, I feel like everyone will probably have one of these days. So, bit of a shame. Lost the championship lead, but he's going to one of his favourite tracks next. So, he'll be back.
Yeah, again, as we said earlier, it was kind of misfortune more than anything. I mean, he's clearly really comfortable around this track. Another front row. Yeah, it was just unlucky. It was just unlucky, really. I think he could very, very easily have won this race. But we spoke to Palou post qualifying about just how drivers have adapted from the 500 going back to a really bumpy street course, which is pretty much the direct opposite. I think Herta said it was the most difficult thing that the drivers will have to do in terms of feeling inside the car. So I pushed Palou for his take on that as well. For Alex, Colton kind of mentioned this before you got here, but just how hard is it to make that transition from the 500 back to street course racing? And I guess how do you go about approaching that transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's what makes this series so special and so different. Like, we go from the smoothest place to the bumpiest place on the calendar, and it's totally different what we do at IMS to what we do here for Detroit. So I would just say that it just puts a lot of extra difficulty on the drivers, but especially also the teams having to prepare cars completely different. The engineers having to switch from just think about pounds of drag and downforce to just more ride heights and bumps. But I think that's what it's so unique of this series, and that's what it makes it so special to be.
We then go on to Jack Harvey, who had, again, quite a retrospectively quiet day. He had a crash in practice, but obviously ended up being all okay in the end. So he ended up 17th ahead of his teammate Tristan Vautier, who I think might be third for crazy days, considering it felt like he was a lap down about 4 different times, and then he was sitting in third place for a random period of time, and then he ended up a lap down. So he must have had to go for a splash of fuel or something right at the end. But Tristan Vautier was back for the first time in 7 years in this never-ending loop of who's going to be in Dale Corey Racing next week. Surprise, it's not going to be Vautier next week, so place your guesses on who it's going to be, because it could well be anyone. Anyway, I thought out of all the random drivers I've seen, he probably gave the best showing of anyone. I mean, He had the best chance because the race was the most crazy, but
he gave the best showing of everyone and was probably the most random of everyone as well. I mean, for us, obviously, as people who've followed Stark Family in IndyCar in the last 5 years, he's an unfamiliar name to us, but he's the 2012 Indy Lights champion. He did a full season with Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports in 2013, but I think there were budget issues there. Didn't have a great season. He was Rookie of the Year, but I think finished only ahead of one kind of full-time driver. But yeah, then he's kind of gone off into the sports car realm. He did a part season in 2016 with Coyne, or 2015, sorry, with Coyne, where he had his best finish, incidentally, on the old Belle Isle circuit in Detroit, where he finished 4th and then came back for one race to deputise for Sebastian Bourdais in 2017 at Texas Motor Speedway. So it's been 7 years since he'd been in an IndyCar. It's been 9 years since he'd been in an IndyCar on a street course. I mean, obviously a lot of change with the aero screen, etc. But I think the thing he said that it took most getting used to was the just sitting centrally in a car again after, he's raced sports cars at quite a high level. He's been, I think he won the Sebring 12 Hours with JDC Miller Motorsports in IMSA in the top class in 2021. He had a few years there. Last year he was with one of the privateer teams, I believe, in the top class of WEC. Van Wall, that is the one. Sports car experience has been kind of his background since he departed IndyCar. That's why he can't do Road America, because he's reserve driver for the Ganassi Cadillac cars at Le Mans, I believe. Very random, but he gave a decent showing, and he was pretty competitive with Harvey. He found himself in the top 10, then out of the top 10 and back in 3rd, and then being torpedoed inadvertently by Herta and avoided that, as we said, which was impressive.
Finishing order, we've touched on the sort of these names already, but it was Herta, McLaughlin, Robb, Blomqvist, Grosjean, Simpson, Elio Castroneves. We'll get on to that in a minute. Joseph Newgarden, who we'll touch on Newgarden because he had a disastrous day. I don't know why I said it like that. He had a disastrous day. There's like, I think Montoya was the last person to win the Indy 500 in the race afterwards, and that was some 20-something years ago. And Newgarden, I mean, he qualified well. He was running quite well at the start, and then had the incident with Palou, and then he ends up running over one of the RLL people in their pit box because he just ran over wheel gun, so he got a drive for a penalty for that. And then it just went so wrong for Newgarden in every way. I feel like he had another incident somewhere back. Oh, he touched the wall, didn't he? He hit the wall on turn 9, which meant he had to pit. Oh, it was just a terrible day for Newgarden.
Yeah, it was a scruffy one because I actually felt like he showed quite well in the early parts of the weekend. To be fair, I think he also kind of the similar thing happened last year where he showed quite well early on, and I'm not sure where he ended up finishing last year in the end. But yeah, since the news of the penalties for St. Pete, which came after Long Beach, he's just not, apart from the 500, of course, seems to be able to really find much of a rhythm. And I don't know if that's a correlation or not. I think today has to be deemed an outlier just because, I mean, all week he's been on a media tour. He's been to New York. He's been on all sorts of TV shows, what have you. And yeah, it comes to Thursday and yeah, obviously he can learn from last year, maybe par it down a little bit, but he will have been exhausted coming into the week. He probably would have been deprived of sleep. He wouldn't have had as much preparation as kind of he would have wanted. But I think this just had echoes of the Indy road course race where pretty sure, he qualified fourth there. Did he qualify fourth for this race?
Qualified third. His
qualified
starting position
third.
was third, yeah.
But still a very, very similar sort of race for him, I would say.
Well,
yeah,
this was a bit more disastrous.
This was
Sort of
even more disastrous.
Went wrong every. I mean, running over pit and poor RLL guy. He only needed a sort of ice pack though, and it was all right. It's like the classic primary school thing: put an ice pack on it and I'll sort it out. So
yeah, it was
a scary incident. Glad everyone got away from it. But
I think it was unfortunate because I don't actually think it was Joseph's fault because it seemed like he just got the wheel gun hooked round his tire and that kind of harpooned him into the wall, which was yeah. But other than that, it was just messy, wasn't it? Obviously, the way it ended.
Joseph Newgarden had a pretty disastrous weekend, unfortunately, but he'll still look back on last week with pretty happy memories, I'm sure of that. And if you want to reflect the epic Indianapolis 500 we got last week, why not pre-order a Joseph Newgarden Indy 500 champion race model from the Formula Model Shop website, which not only that is the best place to get various other bits and merch such as clothing, driver helmets, and other replica items in the UK and across the rest of Europe.
You can use the discount code 5BOMB, or one word, FIVEBOMB, to gain 5% off products on the FMS site. Visit the Instagram highlights on the DIVEBOMB Motorsport Instagram account for a link to an exclusive VIP section on the FMS store, courtesy of DIVEBOMB.
And on the DIVEBOMB website, you've got a nice little pink banner to click into the Formula Model Shop website, or if you're more convenient, find formulamodelshop.co.uk.
Stay tuned for more giveaways, events, and other content. To briefly touch on Herta as well, because, you know, I mean, we kind of went into more depth earlier, didn't we? But how is he going? He needs to start converting a sort of result, and it's probably an apt time to play in what I asked him on Saturday after qualifying about just kind of how they refocus after the heightened emotions of the 500. And obviously, he had a particularly disappointing 500 with that crash. Thanks, Dave. First of all, for Colton, how hard is it to refocus after all the emotions and I guess the fatigue associated with the 500? And how do you go about managing this quite congested period of races?
I mean, unluckily for me, there wasn't a lot of fatigue because I didn't really do a lot of the race. Unfortunately, it sucks. You know, what really sucks is having to go back out there and watch everybody have fun and race for position, and you just kind of tote around the back and try to pick up spots. So, but overall, like what I said before, the best remedy for it is getting back in the race car. So it's nice to have a back-to-back weekend after the 500 for a lot of reasons. But for me personally, for this time was because of having a bad 500. It's nice to get back in with the engineers working on something brand new and get going on a new weekend.
And the final it wasn't classified. The final individuals. Christian Rasmussen, who's running quite well in about the top 10, just had an engine issue, unfortunately, just engine blew on him. Been a bit of a frustrating year in some ways for Rasmussen. Apart from the 500, it feels like hasn't quite unlocked performance. Again, just unluckier today. So, he's got 3 more races to prove himself, and another 2 later on in the season after that.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, it's pretty incredible that actually when he's not got many races left at all. And we didn't say this last week. I'm pretty disappointed we won't see him on another oval, to be honest, after the fireworks he produced at the 500.
We'll touch on Elio Castroneves, where he was in the car this weekend. And if you didn't catch the news, Tom Blomqvist was dropped for 2 races. Helio will be back for next week in Road America. But the general understanding is Tom Blomqvist has been dropped for the rest of the season. This isn't confirmed, to make clear, but he's remaining part of the Meyershank program that many interpret as him coming back to the sports car program next year. But we probably won't see Blomqvist in the rest of the year just because of concerns over the leaders' circle. Obviously, there's rumours that one of the major sponsors will be leaving at the end of the year, and therefore it's a priority to get them into the leader circle because they couldn't do that last year in the car that Pagenaud had initially occupied. So Castroneves was in for this weekend. Obviously, it's quite hard to interpret a result because he got punted by Ferrucci. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame for Tom Blomqvist. Obviously, we're really excited to see him come over, and it looks like his IndyCar tenure might be ending, is ending earlier than initially hoped.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot to say on this. I'll try and keep it as short as I can, but I can't promise it. But I think it was a bit unclear when it was a surprise when the news first emerged. I think a little bit unclear why it had been done. It obviously kind of emerged that leader circle is in mind is kind of why it was done. If it was an injury, it would have been cited. I just feel it was a bit too early to panic about leaders circle. I mean, you look at RLL last year, they got rid of Harvey with 3 races to go. I believe that car still made it into the leaders circle. So, yeah, I mean, you kind of think they should know what they're getting themselves in for with a rookie. I mean, maybe it was a collective decision. Obviously, they said mutual in the statement. You never know how mutual these things are. Callum Ilott and Huncross. Yeah, Callum Ilott and Huncross was the other one that came to mind. That was clearly not as mutual as they said. Maybe Blomqvist felt that he needed a bit of time out of the spotlight. Maybe it was a bit of a baptism of fire, but I can't imagine that's the case. I think, ultimately it's a bit of a brutal decision based off performance, and with futures uncertain, it's kind of, he probably will stay part of the family for the sports car. They're looking to return to sports cars in IMSA, the top class next year after the whole Daytona cheating, if you want to call it that, debacle. They lost that this year. He's a superstar, Tom Blomqvist in sports cars. Everybody knows that. So that would be an easy way to kind of, for him to stay on the books at MSR. But in terms of Castroneves being the one replacing him, it just felt like a bit of a stopgap. I feel like I think I've mentioned to you guys that David Malukas, at the end of Castroneves' 2 races here in Detroit and Road America kind of coincides with Malukas possibly being fit again. But I don't see Castroneves as that much of an upgrade on Blomqvist. It's been 10 years since he last won on the road and street course. Is he really going to enhance the leaders circle chances? He kind of retired for a reason, and kind of took up that ownership role.
He didn't retire. He specifically said he had not retired.
Well, yeah, but he seemed to retire from road and street course racing. But I kind of just feel like, what do you gain from putting Helio? And maybe it pleases the sponsors, even if he does get a bad result. But he was nowhere in qualifying. He was nowhere through practice. And even when he got punted out in the race, I think Rosenqvist, who had pitted with a puncture, was still ahead of him at that point. I would have preferred to see them just give Blomqvist 2 more races to turn things around, to kind of prove himself a little bit.
Also, in the neutral this week was Newgarden has signed a new multi-year contract. So I'll definitely really too much to touch on here. It wasn't really a surprise. He's obviously back-to-back Indy 500s. He's won 2 series championship with the team. I don't see where else he's going to go and make progress in his career. So I'm going to be seeing him at least for a few more multiple years at Penske. So
well remembered. Well remembered.
Thank you.
I think the standout thing from his quotes were that he kind of feels like, he's 33, he's got 30 wins. He doesn't feel like if everything kind of continues as it goes, that he feels like 60 wins isn't beyond the realms of sort of reasonability. So yeah, he said that he still feels like there's even more of a ceiling to reach at Penske, which after, he feels he could have 4 championships even if things had gone better in the 3 successive years he finished second, along with his 2 championships. So yeah, no surprises really. There was also an extension with Hitachi Astemo, which was, I assume Astemo is a kind of branch of Hitachi, but I bring that up because his livery this weekend was wonderful.
Right, so next thing to do is funny moment of the weekend. What stands out? I feel the whole Ferrucci trying to scrap Kirkwood and all Herta's comments have to. I think
particularly the Herta branch of it, because I think the Ferrucci thing was amusing and he overstepped the mark a bit. But I think the whole Herta just
Herta's comments I think win it. We also missed Herta completely bumping into Ferrucci mid-race. He just completely dive bombed him for absolutely no reason.
That was during it was one of the turn 3 pile-ups.
Yeah, I mean, Herta's comments about Ferrucci don't look particularly good after how the 2 of their weekends ended, but I feel the whole saga's got to take the cake on this. And Carl Kirkwood also found Tristan Vautier being announced on Tuesday afternoon pretty amusing as well. So
yeah, I completely forgot about that. He just sat next to him in the press conference and was absolutely laughing his head off when he heard about this. So, which was fair, weren't we all?
Unsung hero of the weekend. There's a lot. I think there's a lot to pick from this weekend. So
it's just depends.
Again, it's how it's how you define unsung.
Yeah, well, that's our interpretation.
You look at someone like Théo Pourchaire in 10th. He's probably not unsung because
I'm going for Théo Pourchaire.
Would you think? Do you think he's?
I think the fact when you take in the steering issues at the end, where he was driving with a car which was pulling him down right, and the fact he had pretty strong, I think his recovery to 10th was pretty good. Considering all else that happened, I think he's gone somewhat unnoticed. So Pourchaire's my pick.
Fair enough. I
don't know what was the motive.
If it wasn't for everything else, I would have said Ferrucci finishing 9th and qualifying 10th.
Well, should we just ignore all the off-track action and just say that Ferrucci takes it?
Because that's a big, he spoke about in the week actually about the sort of Penske alliance and how much, they kind of went both ways for the 500, but it's really benefiting and it's kind of just been a clean slate for Foyt this year with all of kind of Penske's help. So, credit to Ferrucci, to be fair. I think Rossi's another one, probably.
I don't know if you'd call it unsung, but I feel like Power, just with the issue at the beginning, all the penalties to then kind of climb up. But then again, it depends what you say is unsung, because there's so much that kind of happened in the race that...
Yeah. Honourable mention Canapino as well. I think he's in some decent form at the moment. Almost performing just as well as Grosjean.
Right. The podium predictor tournament heading into this weekend. I'll be honest, I could go through everyone's results, but it's pretty pointless. Everyone went for Palou, and I was like, well, everyone's going for Palou. They might look like an idiot if I get this right. So I was like, I'll go for McLaughlin. Didn't really turn out much better. But everyone went for Palou victory, and then there was a lot of Power seconds, and then there was a lot of Herta seconds. I won't bore you because all of these are pretty much wrong, apart from Ellie and the DIVEBOMB IndyCar writers, who both predicted Dixon third and therefore get 1 point. So the standings, therefore, don't really change much. Ellie moves ahead of the DIVEBOMB followers in 7th. The standings on the screen. And the DIVEBOMB IndyCar writers level themselves up with Archie and Formula Model Shop in joint 4th. So let's hope we have a better Road America, because that was pretty disastrous.
Honestly, it was awful. My predictions were awful as well. But a place is a place.
Time for the Firestone Fastest Predictor Tournament from Detroit. So me and Archie's predictions are very similar last week. We went for Palou, McLaughlin, Rosenqvist, Power, Kirkwood, and I went for Lundgaard. Archie went for Marcus Ericsson. In the end, obviously, Palou was correct. Kirkwood was correct. So McLaughlin, was correct. So we both have 3. And then Ellie went for Dixon, who was correct. Newgarden, who was correct. Grosjean, who was incorrect. Palou, who was obviously correct. And Kirkwood is correct. So Ellie ends on 4. And myself and Archie end on 3. So Ellie's championship lead opens up by 1. So you're now on 20. Archie's on 18. And I'm on 17. But with that said, another race next week. So give us 2 minutes and you'll have our predictions for Road America. Right. Who wants to kick us off this week?
I can go if you want.
Yeah, go on.
So I'm going to go for, well, there's a revelation we've just found out is that Alexander Rossi is very good in qualifying at Road America. So I'm going to nab that pick from you, Dan. I'm also going to go for his teammate Pato O'Ward. Alex Palou, of course. Will Power, of course, given how reliable he's been in qualifying, even if he didn't make the Fast Six this week. Scott McLaughlin, and then my slightly more road pick is going to be Santino Ferrucci, because they were decent there last year, and now they've got the Penske playbook added to it. So I'm going to go Ferrucci making a surprise appearance.
I think ours are similar, -2. I've gone for Award, I've also gone for Rossi, Palou. I went with Herta, Howard and Dixon.
I've gone for Herta, Palou, Award, Dixon, Rossi, and Ericssson.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll see how my Andretti emissions pan out, because I'm just thinking they haven't been phenomenal on road courses this year. So,
but they were good last year at America.
They were good there last year. That's the thing.
Herta would have won if they pitted him in the right lap. So
yeah, we shall see.
Yeah, Herta hasn't won in almost 2 years now.
Yeah,
so.
this was his chance.
Well, it will come.
He'll get more chances.
It will come this year. I know in the mid-season review we'll do our picks of who will win the rest of the year. I know we did one at the start of the season, but it feels like a win is coming for her. So you got very close, this week. You feel like maybe in the Indy 500 had things gone his way. Again, Long Beach was in the picture. So you feel a win is coming for Kirkwood. Not Kirkwood. Oh, yeah, I feel like a win is coming for Kirkwood. I think that also stands. I feel like a win is coming for Andretti in general. Power is one who you feel he's just waiting for that win. So there's quite a few. Award to get a win on track again. You feel it's coming. So Lundgaard, I'd also say, is in the mix there. So it's quite a lot. I mean, there's not that many races, but running out of road street courses for the road street course experts.
Yeah, before Newgarden goes and wins every single oval race.
I mean, on a more serious note, like people like Alex Palou need to have an absolute stonking next 3 rounds at Road America, Laguna, Mid Ohio, because with the short overs coming up, I know Newgarden isn't a particularly favourable championship position now, but you look at Iowa. If he sweeps both of them again, he's going to be right back in the mix.
It always staggers me. Alex Palou's not won an oval race, which is a big surprise.
Well, I guess in some ways it is, but he's never really stood out. I think he got podium Iowa last year, sort of at last gasp and a late restart, but that's been about it, really. We've seen from Palou and ovals, so yeah. But
I think just given his caliber, it's
yeah. I mean that's what he's got to perfect, and yeah, these ovals are going to have a big turning point in the championship. That really swings the favour towards Dixon, towards Power. You maybe could put Pato O'Ward in there. Many regard him to be the second best at ovals after Newgarden. So the next 3 rounds, I think, from a general championship standpoint, will make or break people's championships. So we will see. I mean, the 2 short oval double headers will also be really significant. Maybe somewhere like Milwaukee opens up the chance for Palou there, where not many drivers have raced there. So yeah, we will wait and see. But there's not much waiting to do for Road America next week, as that is the next round of the championship. Will be on to round 7 of 17. Quite a fun track, Road America, the longest on the calendar. Many people like it. Loads of elevation, loads of chance for drama, and it's always quite fun at Road America. Although
drama,
we always say it blends into Mid Ohio, and this should be Laguna. They all perform as one race, aren't they? So
yeah. Do we remember what happened at Road America last year?
Grosjean went off track about every 25 seconds.
Power
punch Dixon.
Yeah, it was punch in the face. Punch in the face was Road America last year.
It's one of our best ever episodes, numbers wise. So you did like the punch in the face. That was good. And we had the iconic quote of Grosjean needs a punch in the face, and he tried to punch Dixon, and the
Grosjean is a piece of crap. Is what he said.
If you saw what he did in practice, he needs a punch in the face. That interview will always be legendary. Yeah, we might play it again next week. We played it as the intro last year, so Will Power for chance. So we'll see. Anyway, back on topic is Road America next week. We're very much looking forward. We're sort of getting into the swing of things now, really. There's going to be a lot of races between now and the Olympics. We're looking at, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 races in the next 7 weeks. So there's going to be a lot to recap, a lot to look forward to. And that all kicks off at Road America next week. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you.
And Grosjean is a piece of crap. If you saw what he did in practice, he needs a punch in the face.